So I've decided to make another video about life in China versus life in the US. In this video, I'm going to talk about a topic that's important to everyone, money. So let's start with currency. Here's some Chinese currency right here. This currency actually has a couple of names. The main unit is called yuan. You'll often hear people pronounce this as yuan, but in the original Chinese it's actually yuan. You can also call this currency renminbi, which means literally the people's currency. So what's the difference between yuan and renminbi? Well, renminbi refers to the currency as a whole, while yuan refers only to the unit of the currency. Confused? Yeah, that happens a lot because we don't really make that distinction in English most of the time. One reason you need the word renminbi is to distinguish from other yuan currencies that exist now and in the past, such as Chinese currencies from before the People's Republic of China, as well as the Hong Kong dollar and Macau pataka, which are also called yuan in Chinese. Even dollar currencies outside of Chinese-speaking areas, like the US or Canadian dollar, are actually called yuan in Chinese. So when you say renminbi, that shows clearly that you mean the currency used in mainland China today. So how much is that worth? Well, like most currencies, it fluctuates. At present, it's about 6.5 yuan to 1 US dollar. I've seen it as high as 6.2 to the dollar and as low as 7.1 to the dollar at various points over the last 5 years. How do you spend money in China? Well, like anywhere else, there's cash. When I first came to China, it was very much a cash-based economy. Larger stores did accept credit and debit cards, but most small places would only take cash. Things have changed a lot in that regard over the last decade, though. Today, paying by phone apps is ubiquitous in China, much more common than in the US when I lived there. Though I hear it's gotten a lot more common in the US recently to avoid touch points during the pandemic. The main apps used in China are WeChat, which is also a social media app used to chat and post pictures, and Alipay, which is mainly just financial and is the largest mobile payment service in the world, even larger than PayPal. Mobile payments have largely made debit and credit card payment fall by the wayside, especially since they were never all that widely accepted anyway. The only exception is contactless smart cards used in public transportation, which remain fairly common here. Although even in public transportation, phone payments are starting to make inroads. For me, I haven't used a smart card since I left Guangzhou last year. One mode of payment that has never been popular here in mainland China is checks. Hong Kong has historically used checks because of the influence of the British financial system there, but in mainland China it has never been popular, and most people have never written a check. Unlike in the US, where many young people have never written a check, basically no one has ever written a check here in mainland China. There are some differences in expectations when it comes to spending money also. One example is that tipping is not practiced. So if you go to a restaurant or get a ride somewhere in an Uber, well, it would be a DD here, but the same kind of thing, you're not expected to leave a tip and you don't need to calculate that in your spending plans. Another thing is, in China, it's not common to see psychological pricing. What's that? Well, psychological pricing means prices like $9.99 that are meant to make you think something is cheaper than it really is. In China, most prices are just in ordinary old round numbers. One exception, Disney still loves to use psychological pricing like for their merchandise at Shanghai Disneyland. So I guess you need to find an American company for this. Another thing that's different is if you want to be reimbursed for something that you buy, you can't just get reimbursed using an ordinary old receipt written on thermal tape. you need a special kind of receipt called a fapiao.
Historically, fapiao were printed on watermark paper to make them harder to forge. These days you can often get digital fapiao with unique numbers or codes that make them unforgeable.
Getting a fapiao can be a bit of a hassle, but if you want to get your money back from your employer as a reimbursement, you're going to have to get one. Another thing everyone needs to know about money is taxation. In most ways, China's tax system is much simpler than the US's. The tax code here is much simpler, and when money is withheld from your paycheck, it's usually just that simple.
You don't usually get stuck filing a return later on to get a refund or potentially pay more taxes. On the other hand, this does mean you don't get as many chances to reduce your tax bill. In the US, I'd be getting credits on my taxes for having 2 kids. Here, I don't get anything like that.
US citizens living abroad like me also have somewhat more complicated tax situations than most foreigners here, because the US, unlike almost any other country in the world, requires all of its citizens to file tax returns with the US itself, even if they don't actually live in the US.
There are ways most U.S. citizens living abroad can lawfully avoid paying any tax to the U.S., but it does mean we have more paperwork than many folks living outside their home countries.
Well, that's just a bit about money in China versus money in the U.S. This is a topic we could talk about forever, so maybe I'll make another video about it someday. If you don't want to miss that video, this would be a great time to like this video and subscribe to my channel. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this little talk about money in China. So I'll see you all next time. Bye.